Thank you very much for joining us on the online Creativity and Culture Conference. On behalf of University for Life, let's welcome Abha Banerjee. Abha Banerjee was named India's first internationally acclaimed female motivational speaker in 2008 by the ESAR Media Group, which is the largest media group in India/Asia. Abha has won several awards for coaching and leadership. She was born in India and resides in Indonesia and Malaysia. Let's welcome Abha Banerjee.
Hi, namaste and welcome to the Creativity and Culture Summit 2017 hosted by the University for Life and Jasveer Mahil. My name is Abha Banerjee and I am an advocate for creativity, a crazy one. So what I'm going to talk about is something a little different from the academic version of what we hear about creativity. The word that's fancy but also frustrating because we are around it all the time. We know what it is somewhat, but we don't know what to do with it and how. And I think because we have defined it in a very human mind kind of definition, which makes it a wee bit uncreative because the human mind has not yet been able to fully fathom, if I can say so, fathom the expanse of what creativity is and what it can do for us. And as a society somewhere, we are oblivious of what it brings to the table. What if I told you that you have the power to be creative, productive right now? If you got the opportunity to peel off the social conditioning and figured what was your personal, creative, dynamic inside your body and mind. What if that could happen? We may not be the talented creative, but we all have creative power which we are not using thanks to the lack of knowledge on our part and sometimes reprimand on the part of our cultures. We have heard words like rebellion, misbehavior, a random occurrence or a favorite pastime of some people, the select few people who love to challenge the status quo. We have to find more, I think, acceptable definition of creativity. We have fallen short because so far we have failed to see the upside. We have not given creativity its rightful place. We have not sought refuge in its power. We have denied its presence, and we have not worked on removing the stigma that is attached to it, the stigma of uncertainty. We have not figured a version that works to the utility of the individual and the collective, and we need to sort of delve deep enough to see that it could be the way out for the human being to raise herself out of a poor circumstance or grow into any positive circumstance. So if you're ready to claim and free that process of creativity, personal creativity, we have to let the world see it works. And then we must, stretch that creative muscle into the socio-cultural space and make it acceptable, doable, achievable, dependable, and maybe fun. I just love what I'm talking about. Just wait and watch what's coming. I am a laywoman, sorry, lay the woman. I'm so sorry. Bad joke, not at this time. I am an experiential educator, a connector of thoughts and ideas, a staunch follower of nature and its USP, growth. But the sad part, I feel badly about this because the highest benefactor of this phenomenon is the human being is still ignorant of the power that lies in creative growth. So I'm going to share a very personal experience now that blew my mind away by what I saw and what was revealed of me, of my own creative mind, because I was this known uncreative person. And, it sort of just gave me that opportunity. It obsessed me with plugging that deep observation, that feeling, and that creative experience into every thought and action thereafter, literally bombarding me with thought effectiveness, literally, vertically, deeply, widely, optimally. And I believe that is going to do the same thing to you, and it's going to drive you back to your own experiences to identify your own creative genius. And you know what? Culture is at a loss for not understanding such simple stuff. We're going to let them see it. Here it goes. Many years ago, when I was just 15 years old, I'm not going to tell you how many years back that was, I was chosen to be part of my basketball team in school. Now, by God's grace, I'm just 5 feet nothing, and nothing under the sun qualifies me to be in a basketball team. But the only reason I was there was that my team extra was absent that day. My other opportune credential was that my coaches knew that I could play all games. I was agile. I was, as a team player, very aggressive, and I could fill in for anybody at any time because of being this, overall hyperactive extracurricular person. So I was basically a filler for the day. Now this is an inter-school match with 200 students lining the court cheering their teams, 30 all, and the last 5 minutes of the game for end time. I was cheering and I was like an animated warrior oscillating between two thoughts. What if I was on the court? And what if I were supposed to make that last basket? Now we are 30 all, one basket needed. And the other mind was saying, okay, I'm not going to go in and play over there. What are we going to get for refreshments after the match? Now, suddenly, while this is going on, and I hear that my name is called, and holy heavens, I see the captain has fallen down. And she's hurt herself. I'm called in to play for the last 5 minutes of the match. Now, my mind froze for a second. I wasn't expecting this. I was wanting to do this, but not expecting this to happen. But I go in there, my mind freezes, and I do as I was expected to do. What an extra is supposed to do. I go in, and I'm supposed to kill the 5 minutes. Pass the ball, kill the 5 minutes. I did exactly that. God was likely listening to this inner chatter that I was having, that animated warrior thing. And you know what? The ball went out of the court and I got to throw the ball back in. Now, I'm standing at the center line, waiting to throw the ball back in. 3 minutes to the match, 3 minutes to the end time. And this is, again, these 200 people and all these tall girls flailing their hands in the air, ferocious as ever, and everybody screaming, asking me to pass the ball. That's what we knew in basketball. Short passes, small dribbles, back covers, and get closer to the basket. Now, I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling absolutely confused about what's going on. And there's 3 minutes left. One basket, 3 minutes. And all these tall girls eyeing the ball. I have no clue what to do. Something happened suddenly at that point of time. I did not pass the ball. I wanted to pocket that basket and win. The only problem was that as an extra, I was not supposed to do that. And the second practical problem was that I was too short and the basket was almost 50 feet away diagonally from me. And I was to throw the ball from there. Now, a difficult one. I don't think it's been done earlier. And I had never done this before. But I kept thinking, why must we risk it? Why must we lose? Can we make this basket? And this was the first ever time in school that I was remembering my physics. The kinetic energy, the speed, the potential energy, the height, the distance from that angle, and can I not do it? I was feeling heavily intelligent myself, and nobody thought I was doing a smart thing at that point of time. But I said, okay, let me just give it a try. Half a second, and I turned my body to the left. This is where the basket was. I turned my body slightly to the left. I aimed, and my coach is looking at me. I looked at him, and I mean, this was our sign. Like if I could not tell him what's going on, I would say, I would do this to him, and he would say, I told him, sir, see what I'm going to do. It's okay, I can manage it. And I threw the ball. And voila, we got the basket. We won the match, and I don't remember the rest of the feeling, but something happened after that. Despite the screams of, "Are you stupid?" I went ahead and did what I thought was the best thing in that moment to win. But it was not approved later. I was reprimanded for being indisciplined and not listening to the team, despite the fact that we had won. I was disappointed. I was angry. But in retrospect, when I thought about it, I said, let those people be. Let them reprimand me. But that incident for me was it's left an indelible impact on my mind. As I said, a stretch of strengths that I had no idea I possessed, and the chances of those strengths being seen were near zero if the opportunity to test those strengths had not arisen in that particular opportunity. What was created, I think, in that moment was a synergy between that opportunity, the need to win in that moment, my personal knowledge, and whatever talents we carry with us, that momentary risk-taking ability, the faith in that ability, probably the thought process at that point of time, and the action taken. So the question is, was this being creative, or was it the sense of conviction that I could create a win? I think both. And it's like a maze, a maze will always make you ask yourself the question that when it's that point in time, or in life, or at any given opportunity, what's the best thing to do? Can we find a way out? When we don't give up, when we want the best answer, we want to know what works. And I think that is what is creative. It does not need that talented creative originality at all points of time. What it needs is appropriateness. What it needs is usefulness. What it needs is actionability. A stretch met with our innate strengths by accessing the emotional and mental engagement, the need of the hour. And in that moment, what is it that we could have done? What is it that we can do at any given moment? So my case for creativity is the articulation of this synergetic process of conscious engagement. And I'm going to show you how you can create your own version and take it to every other area of your life, because that is where our power lies, our creative power lies, our creative strength lies over there. And I always speak of the last 3 minutes of the basketball mat, and you can imagine that my mental and emotional, intrinsic mental and emotional engagement must have been an all-time high. My creative thought process very in the moment. The questions asked were power questions, and the concrete actions that were taken were the actions that were really sort of needed at that point of time. I'm going to break it down for you and turn it into 4 simple steps. So let's call it the 4 C synergies, 4 creative synergies. You can call it whatever you like, because we are creative people. We do what we want to do, right? And this is not out of the book, okay? This has been created by me out of the context or the story that we were talking about earlier. Let's call the first one contextual synergy. Now, what does the context demand of us? Let's ask this question of ourselves. What does the context demand of me? Now, if we see life, usually it's always been left to chance or circumstance. People will always say, oh, the circumstances were not good. I didn't get the right kind of chances. But I say, no, that's not the point. Let us ask, what is the context demanding of me? So in every circumstance, there's going to be an opportunity for us to make a choice and take some chances. So in our case, in the basketball story, the circumstance looked dismal, literally impossible to achieve. However, that little moment when the ball went out, it gave me an opportunity to make a choice and take a chance. That is what the context demanded at that point of time for the win. However, if we were to go by the coaches and the team's version, they would say it's wrong. But if it were to go by the story version of what I saw at that point of time, you would know that it is right. So let's see what the context is asking of us. Let's see the circumstance. Let's make some choices. Let's take some chances. That's the first one. Number 2, let's call this cognitive synergy. And I love the word cognizance, because it gives me, and I think anybody who's worked on themselves, self-awareness about what I know about my abilities. So let's see, in cognitive synergy, how do we know we are thinking the right thing? How do we know our creative idea is right? How do we know we've made the right choice? The answer is we do not know. And we cannot know unless and until we have developed the ability to stretch mentally into a circumstance and test it in our own experience. How do we do that? By our own self-awareness and through our own learnings and experience, we will know our abilities, and we will have to be able to gauge the benefits as against conflict, because there's always going to be this question whether we're doing the right thing or not, or the society is going to question you whether you're doing the right thing or not. So it's important for us to be able to gauge the conflict as against the benefit. Now, this is individual cognitive synergy. So the knowledge that we have, the memory that we have, and how apt we are in being able to bring it together and structure it in such a way that it becomes useful at any given point of time. How are we going to retrieve all that information and bring it to the table? Now, this is a thought process that can be learned, developed over a period through every experience, if we're going to use these things that I'm talking about just now, because this is not just a nice to have now. It's so pacey today, it's so different, it's so fast, and it's so new every day, that if we are not able to use this process, we will not be able to receive from our experience what we can in terms of our own creative growth. The first 2 were about us. So the next 2 are about society. Let's see, we talked about the creative muscle and taking it into the social context, and let's see what works there. So let's call the third one catalytic synergy, from individuality, individual to systemic. What can we do? So it's a shift that needs creativity as a visible tool of success. We need systems. We need systems that can catalyze benefits as well as leverage on the conflicts. Let's take an example of a filmmaker who brings in people at any given point of time. They're all people who don't know each other. They're random people, but they begin to work immediately on a common goal. There's a system built instantly where random people can pull in their skills, strengths, and just take care of their area of responsibility. Now, can we use that kind of system in catalyzing the social whole brain at work, at cultural levels, social levels? We see so much creative conflict, and let's call it abrasion. There's a fight going on there because people see the world from their own different perspectives and their minds, and that's right, that's not wrong. What do we do to get that conflict down so that it does not break down the creative process? The question is, how do we manage this process of creative abrasion and make it work as a productive process and not just as a process of breaking down the creative process? We do that by turning abrasion into creativity, releasing the constructive impulses of people involved, different thought processes of individuals and groups, and what is needed is designing approaches, designing perspectives, and making it visible to everybody by allowing everybody involved to connect with a single purpose or endeavor. Let's remember nature, growth. Let's go in this direction. So we respect the cognitive disparity, we respect the creative disparity, but we also bring in the multiple perspectives and understand that we have to learn to coexist with the differences in a thriving manner, get results through those differences, and leverage on that conflict. So that's what we need to do. The fourth one, I've called it the collaboration synergy. Now, how do we get the intrinsic motivation, the passion and interest of people, this making everything, a very happy personal challenge for people to be able to utilize themselves in ways that work for everybody around them. So it has become necessary. Let's understand that we have to get creative about what's going on around us. It's too fast, too pacey, too much change, and because in today's world the complex problems exist and which demand integration of multiple skills, extraordinary expertise of people, and collaboration of people coming together who have no clue who each other is and they don't truly understand each other. So what do we do in such a situation to encourage this cross-fertilization of ideas? It is very crucial for purposes of collaboration to take the sting out of the creative disagreement at the individual as well as the collective social level. So we got to replace conflict with benefits. We got to replace abrasion with leverage. We got to replace uncertainty with certainty. So this whole process of abrasion should just become part of the process, the big process of results that become useful for everybody. And we need to begin to celebrate this collective knowledge that builds through exchange of information of getting a talent pool together. We are already doing that, but we don't recognize that as creative. So this is the fourth part. So we have got the four synergies here, two for us, two for the outside of us. So that is context and cognitive, catalytic, and collaborative. So this is simple stuff, you know. So in the basketball story, if you see that the context was an impossible context, the cognitive was the strength that was recognized at that given point of time to be able to understand the thought and action. The catalytic was that I did this to the coach and said, listen, we're going out there and doing it. And then eventually I got kicked for being indisciplined. That is the collaboration part of that story. So it didn't work my way. So let me take you to that last part of my speech today. This is when I was 12 years old, and I'm not going to tell you again when that was, but we were studying the reproductive system in school. And this is like, you know, the book has pictures, you know what pictures there are, and the boys are laughing on one side, girls are giggling, everybody is having a, you know, little shameful time when they're looking at those pictures. But what I saw one picture at that point of time was that of conceived egg and sperm together. So now this is, and after that it moved to becoming this little dot, the embryo, that dot that I saw, and then it moved to become a tadpole, then it moved to become like that bigger tadpole, like Casper, the ghost Casper is flying, and then it was a full-blown fetus. Now, I am just all over that book, because what I saw was not a diagram, not a biology diagram. What I saw was a path. What I saw was the growth path. What I saw that when we start, we move this way. And we don't notice that. This is what the human being has missed out completely. And this is somewhere that we are in ourselves. We are absolutely creative. This is exponential growth. This is normal. This is natural. This is nature. And this is the way it should go. If we're not going this way, we're not being creative. If we are not going this way, we are not growing. If we are not growing, we can't be calling ourselves people who are working on our creative growth. So, very simple, very profound, very powerful. Let's remember this. We got to go north this way. It's a graph. It's exponential. It has to go this way with growth. That's what is creative.
Abha, thank you very much for the speech that you delivered. I found it really interesting in many respects, and I have so many questions to ask you about it. With so many kind of interesting ideas that you put forward, let's start with your personal story, the story about the netball incident, because there's a lot of, questions around ethics, the questions around whether creativity is individual or whether it's collective. So if I start with that story, first of all, in that netball story, when you decided to take initiative and to score that goal because you knew it was the right thing to do, there's a conflict always, isn't there? It's like, well, what is the right thing to do? Are we measuring success based on the fact that you scored a goal, or are we measuring success based on how the others felt about it, how your team members felt about it? Because maybe from their perspective, it wasn't as much of a success as it was in your own eyes. So how do we kind of negotiate that individual versus collective success in terms of creativity?
Jasveer, thank you very much for having me here and letting me share my story there, because it is one of the things that I love to go back to often in my speeches, and especially when we are talking about creativity. Coming to your question about individual and collective success and the initiative that I took at that point of time, let me just take you back to the place where our sociability is taught to us by approval of our behaviors. I mean, either we are rewarded or we are punished for our behaviors. And somewhere down the line, that's how we are taught how to interact with the outside world. However, having said that, I believe that only a person who is individually able to do some things will be in a position to take it out and give it to others. So in the netball story, if I can just say so, that it looked like there's an individual initiative or a decision at that point to not do what we have been taught to do as a team. And the situation was such that I could take that initiative or a chance on that particular moment, at that particular moment, and score that goal. And we won the match. We even got, it was praiseworthy, even from the team's perspective. However, like you said, sometimes from the perspective of the team, it may not have sounded very good because I did not do what was expected of me to do. So I believe that sometimes if we were to talk about creativity from a very simulated perspective, an academic perspective, where a number of people get together towards a common goal, then I think it will amount to being individualistic in some form, and then everybody has to get together to get a particular goal. But if we were to look at the social way of being, in the manner in which we are expected to be, where there's always this expectation that this is the right or the wrong thing to do, that part sometimes, stops the individual to do what the individual can do best at any given point of time. So my case for creativity lies in the midst of these two places, where I am absolutely for teamwork, but I also believe that unless and until I am in a position to do something, I will not be able to take it to the team. So if at that point of time I got an opportunity, or there was a situation where I could have done what was expected, I could have done what was taught to me, I could have done what the team thought was the right thing to do. But at that moment, suddenly, like I felt that maybe, if scoring a goal was probably more important than listening to the rules. So that's what I tried, because eventually the ball, if I did not score a goal, it would have fallen into the court. And the same thing would have happened. We would have had to follow the rules. So I think it's the paradox that we live in society, where in many ways an individualistic perspective about something can sometimes be more useful as compared to a team perspective, especially in a social circumstance. If it is a more close circumstance, a corporate circumstance, an academic circumstance, a research-based circumstance, where we will be in a position to measure what's going on, it doesn't so happen in the social circumstance where nobody is a team. Actually, there is no team. So you have to go out and do what is necessary, what is right, what works, what is relatable, and what is good in the situation. So that's how I feel about that space.
Okay, I understand. And at the same time, I'm aware that there are a lot of cultural differences in our perception of creativity. The cultural differences being that in the Eastern world, like I'm thinking about places like China and Japan, creativity seems to be, it needs to be harmonious. It's not so much about challenging the status quo, which is more associated with the Western approach. Is like creativity is disruptive. It's, disruption is good because it challenges the status quo and pushes the boundaries. Whereas in the Eastern sense, in that kind of story about the netball again, I can see so many of my Japanese colleagues, for example, being very disturbed at losing face, because when one person goes against the grain like that, and it makes the others it makes them lose face, as it were, that is humiliation, and not creative, but more as being aggressive, as being disruptive, as being not harmonious.
Yes. Let me just once again, so if I'm at the cost of repetition, my whole idea of creativity is that, first of all, I need to be able to recognize creativity in the way it works for me. If I cannot communicate that part about me to somebody else, I may not be in a position to even explain what it means for me. Now, if we cut out the theory, and you talked about the East and West, the Eastern world, and you talked about Japan, then there's China. I'm from India. I live in Indonesia part of my life. There's Singapore, there is Hong Kong, Malaysia. These are all places which there is emphasis on community living. And that is the reason why, and families. I mean, there's community and family, that comes first. The individual comes later. And in the West, it's the other way around. It's the individual is all right to be first, and the family or the community is built around concepts rather than coming first. So having said that, the whole idea of harmony over here, and I think in terms of teamwork, harmony is an absolute must, whether you are doing any creative work or even uncreative work. But because of the community living in this side of the world, because of the emphasis on family, and you mentioned the thing about losing face, that is probably the reason, because the individuals have not grown up believing that if they failed, or if they questioned the status quo, if they disrupted something, if they went wrong, if they made a mistake, that they are not prepared, they're not conditioned, they have not learned how to take the rejection or the reprimand. That's not what's taught over here. So I think for me personally, it's a little unusual for me to do what I'm doing over here, because I have just, this is because it's the way I am, caused a lot of disruption at times. I've been challenging all kind of things, and there is there's huge chances of losing face. And the times that, and I don't call it losing face anymore, because I call it, okay, fine, didn't work, let's move on. So let's look at what's next. And people out here in this side of the world can be harsh on failure, even in the corporate sector. I mean, one mistake and you're out. Like in the West, it's the other way around. I mean, you're now spaces are being created for you to make mistakes. So you can be more innovative, you can be more creative, you can be more in terms of, building new stuff. Here, it's not the same. It's a pretty, I won't call it straitjacket, but it's pretty framework. So if it is within the framework, they're happy to call themselves creative. But if it is not within that framework, a lot of people are not mentally conditioned to look outside that zone to see why the new thing would work or not. So they don't spend time on that, and I think that's where the gap is. We need to spend a little more time in understanding that it's possible to do things out of a framework, outside of a framework, and losing face is a word that has always been used for Asia, which is I think we're becoming better at it. We are just getting there where we have understood that failures are part of life, mistakes are part of life. We do things, we fail, we don't do it as well as we thought we would in the beginning, and how much can we depend on hope, and how much should we give it away to the unknowns. We are on the road. I think we'll get there at some point.
That leads me to you talk about the corporate world. The corporate world, I think that people who conform, who are very good at meeting the expectations of their line managers, their bosses, in the hierarchy, those people are valued more than those who are mavericks, who go their own way, because the mavericks are not conforming to what is expected. They're not conforming to what is desired, and what the maverick is doing is good for themselves, but not necessarily good for the organization. And that's why they don't often last very long in that organization, because it isn't really the right space for them.
Right. No, I completely agree on that one, that corporates obviously would prefer to have people within the organization who follow. I don't want to, and it's not wrong. In some ways, I think we need to, there's a huge group of people, and there are systems that need to be followed to get the results, or to get to a point where the corporate is performing. So, disruptions on the way, just because a person is a maverick, there are people who are rebels. Those people don't fit in that environment. But I think things are changing now, because I actually at some point in life I thought I would be totally unemployable because I had more ideas than my bosses, and my bosses would always say that you are always 10 years ahead of time and trying to say things that are probably not executable at this point of time. And slowly I learned to not run that fast. Whatever I would be saying probably would be okay, maybe workable, maybe executable, but if it is not visible to everybody else, it's useless. So in the corporate environment, I think there is now, I believe there's I'm working with many companies over here and strategizing things with them, their leadership, their performance benchmarks, diversity and inclusion. So we figured that there needs to be space for people who can come up with new ideas. There needs to be space for having maybe, and that's why I work better as an outside expert and not as a person who would be employed within a company, because I personally don't have a lot of patience in terms of following a system for a very long time. I'm very okay with any system at all which is there in place, no breaking rules there. However, I believe that somebody has to be able to lead the way forward with the new stuff, so that you can keep updating, keep innovating, keep bringing in new things. So I work very well as an outside expert. So I'm usually working with most of these corporates as an outside expert and bringing new ideas to them, putting them through various tests so that they can to see if they're workable, they're not workable. 50% of them are usually rejected. Out of those 50%, they go into discussion. So we land up doing about 20% of the new ideas. And I would say there's good reason for it, because the pace of new ideas and how they can be implemented, how long it would take for them to become successful, all that needs to be agreed upon by people who have to do it. So it's not, Maverick is not just for themselves. I think these are people who are able to bring in stuff which is useful on the larger platforms, also in the larger space. But how they bring in is, I think, very important. So how they are managing to do that, where they are putting it out, who is receiving those messages, and whether those things are useful or not. I think that's the key part. But whatever the Maverick brings to the table, it needs to be useful, meaningful, and workable. That's it.
Absolutely. Yes. So, yes, because it's very important to recognize that creativity is creativity within a context.
Right.
So you have to be in the right place and at the right time.
Right.
And also
Yes.
your own positioning is important. So as you say, you are much more valued when you are positioned outside of the organization. If you were positioned within the organization, perhaps you wouldn't be recognized as being so popular, because when a maverick is positioned within the organization and they're going their own way, they tend to cause a lot of discomfort. Whereas as an outsider, it's okay to cause that discomfort because you're not, you're not disrupting the internal structure.
Well, I learned that lesson the hard way because initially I did not think, because what comes naturally to me is not something that I had decided in my mind that this is the way it's going to be. But once within an organization, when you end up by default, you end up being in front just because you have more stuff to share, or more solutions coming out, or more ways to do the same thing. By default, you're pushed in front. That causes a lot of discomfort amongst your peers or people who, even people above you. So it took me a while, but then now I know, like, if I'm within a space, and I understand that this is the space, these are the boundaries, these are the people, this is how far they can go or they can't, and then it's fine. But yes, it's just when you're outside, you're like it's a free flow, a complete free